It's been a while since we've looked at something stupid, haven't we? Well, let's do that, shall we? Let's check up on our old friend Leo, see what he's up to. You know me, I like Level Earth Observer because he goes after space travel, something most flat earthers are too cowardly to do. You see, they're too cowardly because they know they'd be in over their heads. Leo, on the other hand, is too dumb to know he's in over his head. We've got 2 videos of his to look over today, but before we do, I'm going to put a counter up on the screen for 3 distinct phrases that I just know he's going to say. Leo could very well be AI generated for all I know.
Look at this. NASA picks Blue Origin's Blue Moon lander for the Artemis 5 mission. After losing out to SpaceX, Jeff Bezos' rocket company will get a chance to carry astronauts to the moon's surface on a mission scheduled for 2029. Strange, because Jeff's last rocket, which I believe was 8 months ago, was a failed launch. I believe the crew capsule decided to go bye-bye about 38,000 feet, and in doing so was a failed launch. So strange, off the back of a failed launch, Blue Origin get awarded a lunar lander contract with NASA.
Is it strange though, Leo? Is it really all that strange? Allow me to introduce you to the Apollo Lunar Excursion Module, or LEM, also referred to as the Lunar Lander. It flew a total of 10 times, with 0 failures, including 6 crewed landings on the surface of the moon and use as a lifeboat to save the crew of Apollo 13 from otherwise certain death. The Apollo Lunar Excursion Module was constructed by Grumman, a company which no longer exists, but has since merged with Northrop to become Northrop Grumman. In 1962, when Grumman was awarded the LEM contract, do you know how many rockets they had launched to orbit? 0. Grumman never built a single rocket, orbital or otherwise. How about spacecraft? How many of those did they design before the LEM? 0. A company with 0 aerospace experience was given the LEM contract, and they delivered 100%. Which actually helps explain why today Northrop Grumman is still so deeply entrenched into NASA's contracts. Because their very first contract was kind of a big deal. So with all of that said, who cares if the last New Shepard flight was a failure? Evidently, it does not matter when it comes to contract acquisition. Never has. By the way, when it comes to spaceflight, there absolutely is such a thing as failing upwards. Blue Origin's New Shepard has had a fairly impressive flight history, with only 1 failure during testing, and 1 failure with its most recent uncrewed flight. However, that failure involved a thermal structural failure on the BE-3 engine nozzle, and as a result, New Shepard's launch abort system was tested during a real mission for the very first time, and it worked exactly the way it was supposed to. The capsule separated safely from its malfunctioning launch vehicle and landed with its payload perfectly intact. That, Leo, is what we call failing upwards.
You wouldn't be trying to push this private sector again, would you, NASA? Bear with me. So I'm over at Crunchbase looking at Blue Origin, which is about discussing the history of the company, and we get to see its investors. Remember, this is supposed to be a private company that's just been bizarrely awarded a contract with NASA off the back of a failed launch. But strangely enough, they've just won a $3.4 billion lunar lander contract. But when we scroll down and we look at the investors of this supposed private company, we can see what a silly charade all of this is. We scroll down, 2 investors, and those 2 investors are NASA and the United States Space Force.
Wow, Leo, that's hilarious, and also not how any of this works. Alright, so let me break it down for you. NASA has always utilized private contractors to carry out its mission goals. Literally from day 1. Its first program, Project Mercury, had spacecraft built by McDonnell Aircraft and rockets built by Chrysler and Convair. The Apollo LEM, like I said, was built by Grumman, an aircraft manufacturer. The command module was built by North American Aviation. The Saturn V was built by Boeing, North American, and Douglas. The space shuttle was built by Rockwell International, Lockheed, and Morton Thiokol. NASA always uses the private sector to do their business. That's how the government works. When the government needs to fix a highway, they don't send out the US Government Inc. repairmen. They call the Bechtel Corporation and contract the work out. And that is why you see NASA listed as an investor for Blue Origin, because when you go a few clicks deeper, like Leo didn't, you can see exactly how much NASA is investing and why. See, here we have it. Funding type, grant. Money raised, $130 million. Oh, and look, here's some news articles about it. Now, I can't read all of this first one because I need to be a premium member and fuck that, but we can see here that NASA awarded $130 million to Blue Origin and money to several other companies to create a, quote, robust American-led commercial economy in low Earth orbit. You see, Leo, that's what that actually stands for. It's low Earth orbit, not level... Never mind. NASA has a vested interest in the future of low orbit space stations because theirs is getting old. They're gonna need new ones, so they fronted some money to the people they're going to be borrowing from in the not-so-distant future. So yes, Blue Origin receives money from NASA. Not all of their funding, as Leo claimed. The amount is right there, and $130 million isn't going to run an entire aerospace company for very long. But this is stuff we already know. NASA gives money to aerospace companies to do things. So you've exposed nothing, Leo. Congrats.
So it's not a private company, is it? It's funded behind the scenes by NASA and the United States Space Force. So that in itself should tell you there's a silly charade at play here. Think about it. NASA awarding a company a contract they're funding behind the scenes anyway, who are supposed to be private.
Behind the scenes. Except it's right there in front of you. Leo, nothing on a .com website is behind the scenes.
Can you see the obvious problem? It's just a silly charade to try and give the private sector some validity for this silly charade that is space.
Let me show you something.
Oh, yes please, Jeff. Wow. I'm guessing this is your Blue Moon lunar lander that won you the contract. Incredible. I don't recall ever seeing something so ugly and ridiculous in my whole life, Jeff.
Now, I have a stupid question for you, Leo. You already know that's not the current design because it's in your thumbnail. That is what the Blue Moon lander is more likely to look like now. So why are you acting like this is the final product? And also, what exactly is your problem with the concept we're being presented? Honestly, it looks like a slightly modernized and larger version of the descent stage of the Apollo LEM, which makes sense because the LEM descent stage was designed to act as a launch pad for the ascent stage when returning to lunar orbit. Keep that in mind as we watch this presentation.
This is Blue Moon. We've been working on this lander for 3 years.
I could have probably come up with a better design within 30 seconds, my dear man. And my design would have looked a lot sexier than that, Tosh.
I'm sure you could have, Leo. You say things like that a lot, but I doubt you could. In fact, I would absolutely love it if you did. A lunar lander as designed by a flat earther. How hysterical would that be? I bet it would have parachutes and wings.
Who are you trying to kid with that?
It's a very large lander. It'll soft land in precise way, 3.6 metric tons onto the lunar surface.
3.6. These clowns love their numbers.
What is my man's waffling about?
The stretch tank variant of it will soft land
Get a sphere in there, my dear man.
6.5 metric tons onto the lunar surface. Let me give you a little tour. The deck is designed to be a very simple interface so that a great variety of payloads can be placed onto the top deck and secured. And the davit system...
Wow, so you've got a roof rack there. Should we want to bring canoes or mountain bikes, we can stick that on the roof rack. That's really well thought out there, Jeff.
Yeah, Leo, it actually is. It's a very popular thing in spacecraft architecture. It's called modular design. Make something robust enough that it can be modified in small ways to fit different purposes. Take Starship, for example. That basic design can be repurposed into a lunar lander, a fuel tanker, a cargo vehicle, a crew transport, and a space station builder. You pointing out this modular design, Leo, doesn't make it ridiculous, no matter how many times you say charade.
Which is inspired by naval systems, you can see it over here, is what's used to lower things off of the deck onto the surface of the moon.
Oh wow, they thought of everything. So should we want to go to the moon and land in this silly oversized pantomime spacecraft, and should we want to lift some metal pyramids onto the surface of the moon, Jeff's got us covered. Brilliant. If you want to go canoeing or or mountain biking, he's got a roof rack on his spacecraft as well.
You think the metal pyramids are what's being lifted, Leo? No, genius, that's the walls of the loading mechanism that gets lowered to the surface. They are really not sending their best, are they?
And the davits can be customized for the particular payloads. We have here as an example a very large rover. And by the way, even though that's a large rover, this vehicle can land 4 of them simultaneously on the surface of the moon.
This literally is an oversized, silly, theatrical pantomime with ridiculous, cheap props.
Capitalism, baby. It's called selling, Leo. This is how you sell to the dinosaurs in Congress. You wouldn't know anything about that, though. Leo basically just repeats himself from here, so we're going to move on to the next video. He did take a pretty decent beating in that one, though.
So let's expose NASA's billion-dollar fraud. You guessed it, the International Space Station. Bear with me.
And that's something that the astronauts also in low Earth orbit feel a lot. We call it also the overview effect. You see the whole picture of the planet below you. We go with 28,000 kilometers per hour. So in 1.5 hours you are back at the same place. The Earth rotates under you. So every time you see a new piece of the planet below you. So that means that 90% of the planet you can see from the space station. So a beautiful planet, a very thin atmosphere. You have the feeling that if you blow very hard, that you blow off the whole atmosphere. You have the feeling that if you blow very hard, that you blow off the whole atmosphere.
Looks like someone did blow very hard and blew part of the atmosphere away. Bizarrely enough, they decided to replace the atmosphere with what appears to be fence posts. Very strange stuff.
Leo, dude, you cannot be kidding me. You think there's a CGI glitch and the atmosphere disappeared. Holy shit, dude, really? Okay, so I'm sure most of you have already figured this out, but let's walk our boy Leo through this. You see, Leo, dear boy, all of these time lapses are taken from the International Space Station. Do you know what the International Space Station has sticking out of it from practically every direction everywhere you look so that they're almost always in camera view like in the previous videos you showed? That's right, Leo, solar panels. What we are seeing here is obviously a silhouetted solar array on the station. You can really tell when you play around with the brightness and contrast. And, even better, my good friend Bert Rickles tracked down the rest of the video, which Leo left out. I wonder why. Not only is mine higher definition, but it continues until sunrise when we see the full shape and layout of the solar panels. Which panels exactly? Well, based on the images I've found and lining up some things here, yep, looks like a Soyuz or a Progress spacecraft. They're virtually identical. If we do some Googling, we can see that Expedition 53 launched in September of 2017, the same month of this video. And it launched on Soyuz MS-06. That's almost definitely a panel of the Soyuz spacecraft. And that makes sense, the one panel blocking the frame is one from a temporary spacecraft, meaning the view doesn't always look like that. But sure, Leo, someone in the graphics department forgot to render half of an object in Blender for a few frames and replaced it with fence posts. That makes sense. That's how CGI works. Well, I guess we've answered the age-old question. Is Leo still dumb? Yes. Yes, he is still very, very dumb. If you enjoy this content, consider hitting the subscribe button. If you really enjoy this content, consider donating on Patreon, becoming a member, buying some of my books on Amazon, or buying some of my merch. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you over the curve, Space Cowboys.